Well, I've just removed my Jetex 22mm carb because I've been suffering over-rich mixture. It was running fine at first when I rejetted the carb, but after a few miles it started running rich, and then it wouldn't start very well and it wouldn't run. In fact, it would run about 100, 200 yards down the road and conk out. It'd just be over-rich. And so, I got to the time where I stripped the Lambretta off, and look what I have found. Let's pick it up in the shot. This is the most common fault that you can find with these Jetex type carbs. Spaco, Jetex, the Del Auto copies, sometimes with Del Auto, but particularly with the Jetex. For some reason or other, the float swells slightly between the pivots. Oops, let's get it up in focus. Just between these pivots here, it swells and gets stiff, and look at that. It's stiff as a board, it can hardly move. So it's getting stuck down and flooding the carburetor, and it's so easily fixed. Just pull the pivot pin and just dress down one side or the other of this float with a bit of sandpaper or wet and dry, however much you have to do, so that it's nice and loose. Particularly you need to watch that when the carburetor is put on the carb, that you operate the float at angles like that, because obviously when you're going around corners, if there's any tendency for the float to stick, then it's going to flood. So make sure that the float is nice and loose and that the float needle jet is working properly. But look at that, classic that is. Great, well, I've solved that problem anyway. So I thought it might be useful just to show that to someone else who may be experiencing an over-rich mixture and possibly flooding, and that's very commonly the cause with these Jetex. When you're testing the float pivot to make sure that it's nice and loose, don't forget to check the actual pivot pin itself in the float. So it really needs to be that loose, like that. If it's stiff, then it's still going to need some working on. And that is really nice and smooth now. So I'll test it on the carb. There we go, and that's how it needs to be, really, as loose as that, so that won't stick anymore. Excellent. Obviously I'll try it with the jet in as well, but that pivot now is nice and smooth and loose. Perfect. Give it a try.